Hello, everybody. Better than I thought it would be.
Oh, now
Mel.
I've dropped you. Hi, Dave. How are you? You well?
I'm pretty good. That was really hard. Sorry.
It was a little bit harder than it needed to be. How are you going?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks.
Yeah. What's life like down in Central Otago at the moment?
I wouldn't know. I'm actually in North Otago at our winery in the Waitaki Valley.
Oh, how exciting!
That's
Well,
right. Yes, recent acquisition.
very, very exciting. Well, I hope everybody's going to get a memo to move from the sellers Instagram to across the. If she's watching now, could let everyone on Special Sellers Instagram know that we're moving to Te Kano, so people can follow us over here, because I know lots of people have purchased your glorious wines ahead of tonight. So welcome. Is this your first live?
Yeah, surprisingly, yeah.
Exciting! How exciting! So
Yes.
we're going to roll for the next half an hour. So 30 minutes and a little bit to get through. Um, so why don't we start with a little brief introduction of Te Kano, because you're relatively new to the block, I think, for down south. So it'd be nice to understand who you are, what you are, to talk a little bit about your incredible cellar door that you've won loads of awards for. And then we can launch into these 5 glorious wines that I have sitting in front of me. How does that sound?
Great. That sounds like a plan.
Brilliant. So tell us a bit about Te Kano and when Te Kano was born, and how long you've been producing wines now, and a little bit about the vineyards and where they're located.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Te Kano is a relatively new project. It was born in roughly 2015 and is the love child of a Californian, Rhonda Lloyd, and her Kiwi husband. Uh,
Mm, we
so
love that.
they met overseas and are really global citizens, but they really have a special place in their hearts for New Zealand and of course New Zealand wines. And so when an opportunity came up in 2015 to purchase a piece of land in Bannockburn, basically in the Golden Triangle, this amazing block on Felton Road,
Mm,
they seized that opportunity and they just haven't really looked back. So that that initial 5 hectare purchase turned into 10 hectares in Bannockburn, and then has has since turned into about another 100 hectares in Northburn, which is a pretty much a whole new viticultural sub-region.
so you've planted
So
yourselves, haven't you?
that's right. So Northburn Station is about 9,000 hectares and is owned by one guy, Tom Pinkney,
Hmm.
and he had planted a vineyard just to the north of where we are, which then sold to Cloudy Bay. So they recognised the potential in that site, and fortunately for us, the Lloyds also saw the potential there, and they bought this 88 hectare piece of land on these kind of glacial terraces above Lake Dunstan,
Amazing.
and yeah, and we've since started developing that. So Te Kano means the seed in Māori,
Hmm.
and we really do see it as being a seed which we're planting for future generations. So we've got this huge kowhai tree on the property. There's one beautiful, ancient tree, hundreds of years old. And when I was walking around with the Lloyds before even planting anything, and kind of asking them, what's your motivation and why do you want to do this? They looked
Mm.
at that kowhai and they said, this is what we're trying to achieve. We want this 400-year legacy of putting back into this place. So that's really what Te Kano is. It's a seed which we're planting for future generations, in fact.
Legacy. Now, the vineyards in Bannockburn, is that primarily Pinot Noir, or do you have other varietals that cross the country make Pinot Gris, Blanc de Noir, Chardonnay, and Pinot? I feel like there might be a few others that we don't have here. but you've got a wide variety of varietals. So tell us a little bit about what varietals are kind of where at your various vineyards.
Yeah, so the wines in your tasting today are all from Bannockburn. So we have a small amount of Chardonnay up there. We've mostly got Pinot Noir, and we've got some Pinot Gris in Bannockburn. We started making Blanc de Noir in 2017, basically as a way to test the boundaries of Pinot Noir. How far can we push a rosé style until it's no longer a rosé, but is its own thing? And
so what are the rules around pushing a wine to the point of it not being a rosé? Are there any legalities or rules around at what point that moves from being a Blanc de Noir to a rosé?
We're really lucky in New Zealand in that there's a lot of freedom around what you can and can't try. In Burgundy, for example, you're very restricted as to what you can do, how you can grow your grapes, what you can call them. I mean, Blanc de Noir, we could call that wine a rosé, but we felt that Blanc de Noir, which means a white from black, actually summed up what we were trying to achieve. We were trying to push past that strawberry and cherry spectrum and right into those kind of white wine flavors of nectarine and stone fruit. And we've definitely achieved that.
Delicious. So talk to me a little bit about how the soils differ between Northburn and Bannockburn.
Oh, well, I don't know where to start. Yeah, just in Bannockburn. So we have two vineyards in Bannockburn. One is on deep clays and silt. That's on Felton Road, and that delivers really plush, deep, gentle, soft tannins and big, plush, inviting wines. And then our other Bannockburn vineyard is 100% sand, so it's a lot more angular in its profile. The vines have to struggle a lot more to grow. You get tiny bunches and berries, and that really shapes those two wines. They're very different. And then Northburn, I mean, is 3 levels of glacial terraces formed over hundreds of millions of years. So the very highest blocks are up around 300 meters above sea level, and it's pure schist. It's very, very rocky and very severe. And then as you come down towards lake level, you've got the kind of glacial outwash, which is gravels and kind of tumbled stones which have been left by the retreating glaciers. And so there's a lot more natural fertility. The vines can get their roots down deeper. So even on that site, it's more like 7 vineyards stuck together than one uniform vineyard.
What would you plant up the top compared to down the bottle from a varietal perspective?
So we thought long and hard about that. What we've tried to do is match the vigor of the vine to the fertility of the soil, or the generosity of the soil. So put all of the white wines on very devigorating soils, because we're trying to tone back their natural want to produce a big crop. So we're pulling them back and we're trying to get more concentration. And with regards to Pinot Noir, we put the kind of early ripening varietals higher up, where it's a little bit cooler, so that we can try and hang them longer and get that extended kind of hang time, build flavor development.
Yeah.
And we put the late ripening or the higher acid varieties like Abel, 114, 113, the high tannin clones. We put them on more devigorating soils to try and or the riper blocks, which get more sun exposure, to try and kind of, even it out a little bit. So, yeah, if you put a very vigorous vine on very vigorous soils, you just end up with this huge canopy, shaded fruit. We're trying to grow a premium product. So
let's launch into, tonight we're taking 2019 Pinot Gris. I know a lot of people who are watching us this evening have had the pleasure in purchasing 5 wines that so that they get given the attention that they deserve. So talk us through Pinot Gris as a whole, maybe a bit of perspective on Central Otago Pinot Gris in your mind, and then this 2019 Pinot Gris that you.
Well, I think Pinot Gris gets an unfairly bad reputation as being bland.
Mm-hmm.
I think it doesn't get the attention it deserves, maybe from grape growers and winemakers. It's got a tendency to crop really highly, and you can have these very neutral wines. Central Otago, and especially our organic farming, we pull back that tendency to overcrop, and we actually end up with very balanced wines with very small bunches. And so our Pinot Gris tend to be very concentrated. They show a lot more of that tropicality. So we get a lot of lychee, we get riper melon flavors, sometimes into like a pineapple spectrum. And we're getting that from our very sandy Jerome vineyard in Bannockburn, because it's so devigorating. The canopy is very small. We get a lot of sun exposure. The grapes get very ripe. And we get a lot of like skin to juice ratio. So you get a lot of flavor in a small amount of juice.
Great. And what was 2019 like in Central and Bannockburn for this Pinot Gris?
19 was a funny year. It was one of those vintages where you felt like you were, there were questions about whether you were going to bring it through or not. I think it was a cooler year as opposed to 18, which was very, very hot. And it was relatively low yielding for us. So this Pinot Gris, we managed to get it ripe because it was a small crop. And we tried to kind of embrace that fruit spectrum and build that mid palate, get a lot of fruit sweetness without the use of sugar. So it's a relatively dry style for Pinot Gris. It's only 6 grams per litre. A lot of them are 7 to 8. And we just rely on beautiful fruit sweetness. Yeah.
And acidity to it as well, which is what this kind of melony nuance, a melon, actually kind of tropical nuance, like you say, but it's that you get down south as well.
Yeah, well, we get those cool nights here. We get very hot days, but at night the temperature drops right down, so we keep that natural acidity. We keep a lovely minerality to the wine. It stays very fresh.
Amazing.
And post-fermentation, we do a lot of work on lees. So we lees stir, and we just build and build that mid palate. And once we feel like we've built that texture, only then will we take it off fermentation solids and move it towards bottling.
Yeah, brilliant. So let's make the more controversial, no, it's not controversial, the more used wine portfolio of Te Kano, which is Blanc de Noir. So us through this 2019 again tonight. So,
yeah, so Blanc de Noir, I mean, the name says it all. It's a white wine from a black grape. And like I was saying earlier, we wanted to basically test the boundaries of Pinot Noir and take it as far as we could. So I find it easiest to think of this wine like a still champagne. You know, most champagne has Pinot Noir in it. And we embraced that winemaking philosophy by picking early, keeping quite high acidity, and fermenting it into a very dry style. So it's got no sugar, no residual sugar left in it at all.
Bone dry.
It's bone dry, and we really wanted that crisp acidity to balance out that natural fruit sweetness that we get in Central Otago. So on entry, the wine is just very generous. You know, it jumps out at you with beautiful fresh stone fruit, nashi pear, you know, these lovely kind of surprising characters from a Pinot Noir. But then, you know, as it enters your palate, you've got that beautiful mid palate, fruit sweetness, but it always finishes dry, refreshing, and very moorish. So it's not sticky and cloying like a sweeter style rosé. It's very fresh, and it just makes you want to keep coming back to it.
Wonderful. I absolutely adore this wine. So it spent time. How much time has it spent on? Is it pressed and then pulled back, or do you have a little bit of skin obviously for the lush colour?
Yeah, so we choose a part of the vineyard which is naturally quite low in colour, so it's very big bunches. We didn't want to fight the wine, so we choose areas each year which are trending towards wanting to make that wine. So this typically comes from our Eliza vineyard, which is deeper, more fertile soils, bigger bunches. And we pick first thing in the morning when it's very cold, and it goes directly to the press. So whole bunches go straight into the press, and we start to press. And as soon as we see that first hint of a blush, that little hint of pink, then we'll cut that press, and we'll ferment that free run portion as Blanc de Noir. So it's a difficult wine to make. It's never consistent year on year. Some years you get higher color, some years you get lower color, but I think that's part of the beauty of the wine. It's an expression of that vintage.
Then the I know.
Yeah, it does have a blush, and if you look at the 2020, that is like a crystal clear wine, very, very pale, very mineral. Whereas 2019, it has that slight blush, but I feel that wine should be like that. It should be an expression of a vintage, and it's not baked beans. Every year is different, and we embrace that.
I think you have to embrace that, don't you? I don't think you have a choice.
Yeah.
So we've got next in up is 20 Chardonnay. Now is going from 0 to hero very quickly over here. The great a lot of people are buying up Chardonnay because New Zealand's slowly developed a reputation. Went from 0 to hero as well for producing premium Chardonnay that kind of the world, and we've created our own as well, which people are really begin to respect. So talk us about your Chardonnay from 20, how that produced, vineyard it's grown in.
Yeah, so we're real believers in Chardonnay. Te Kano is now the largest Chardonnay producer in Central Otago. So we've gone from half a hectare of Bannockburn Chardonnay to over 6 hectares of Chardonnay across our Northburn, Bannockburn and Waitaki vineyards.
So will you make individual Chardonnay? Will it always be a blend?
Mel, well, you've probably noticed that the 2020 label is white, whereas the 2019 labels were grey.
Black grey. Charcoal.
And that is basically a nod to the fact that we have new vineyards coming on now. So moving forwards, the multi-sub-regional blended wines will all be in white labels, so that we want to make an estate style of Chardonnay, which is representative of all of our vineyards. And then the single sub-region wines. So here we've got a Bannockburn wine. Will be 100% from the Bannockburn sub-region. We'll have a Northburn Chardonnay and a Waitaki Chardonnay as well. So that gives us an opportunity to embrace the site, and also to have a Te Kano, a house style, our expression of Central Otago Chardonnay.
Wonderful.
So that's really cool. Yeah, it makes my job a lot more complicated. I've gone from having 6 barrels of Chardonnay to having something like 80 barrels of Chardonnay, and they're all different. But this is why we get out of bed in the morning, and this is what we love. I love seeing the expression of a place in its wines, and I love it that you could give me a sample of a barrel from Northburn and a sample of a barrel from Jerome, and I could tell you that they are 2 different sub-regions. They are that different, and they have their individuality, and it's great to express that.
If only we all had those expertise, Dave. Hey, tell us about the 20 Chardonnay and your winemaking towards this wine as well, because it's quite interesting. So, a little bit.
Yeah, is that the 18 that you have? Oh, you're lucky. So that wine is a that wine doesn't exist in New Zealand anymore. You're tasting history.
Beginning.
18 was an awesome vintage for Chardonnay. It was a very hot year, very, very ripe. And we got these really, for the first time, we pushed fully out of that mineral and kind of very fine-boned Central Otago spectrum, and we started to push into kind of a rounder, almost Hawke's Bay-esque kind of fruit spectrum. So we got some really ripe melon flavors. We got these beautiful kind of buttered popcorn, a lot of richness and depth to that wine. But I feel you still see the Central Otago, characteristic acidity. So we've got this beautiful ripe flavors, but you also have that fresh mineral acid. It keeps the wine balanced and it keeps it very fine. So it's a great vintage.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible that we've got some of the last bottles up here. And thank you for producing something so beautiful into how much it supports the presentation of when you have vintage like that. It's definitely worth keeping. I will be doing that up here. We're going to move now we've got 2 Pinots on the cards this evening. So we've got the 2017 single site. Is it that from Bannockburn?
That will be, that's a Bannockburn blend, yeah. So that's a blend of our 2 Bannockburn vineyards. And
then we have the Ken. So begin with the Ken, because this is and will it align somewhat with the white label house wines that you were talking about previously?
Yeah, so Ken was our way to kind of make a wine which was everyday drinkable. It's in a price point which is a lot more achievable for everyday drinking, and it's also made in a style which is that very fruit forward, generous and just very approachable style. So the Ken label, you'll notice, has these kind of yellow splashes on it, and again that's a nod to our Ko-Fi regeneration project. So I talked earlier about that 400-year-old Ko-Fi tree that we have on site. So we take seed off that every year, and we're growing at least 400 Ko-Fi a year and planting them across our Northburn vineyard. So at present, we've planted 5,000 natives and going. So it's just ongoing and ongoing and ongoing. So Ken's labeling is a nod to that. And Ken's wine style is made for sharing. Ken means family. It's a wine that you want to sit down with your family and friends and just tip out a glass and get into it, basically.
Dave, who designed it?
Oh, an amazing lady, actually, Helen Milner. She did all the brand development for Te Kano, and she did an incredible job. So she really embraced the Ko-Fi theme. We've got Ko-Fi flowers on all of the labels. Our name means the seed. And again, that theme carries through with the Ken. Yeah.
Ko-Fi down here. So exceptional value, Central Otago sells like hotcakes up here. We love it.
It's good.
The last wine in our collection this evening is the Bannockburn Pinot. The 2017 vintage, because this is the first one we're trying from 2017. So a little insight to how that, and then how this wine is. Then I'd like to ask a bit about how long you hold that wine for the market.
Yeah, so our philosophy is to kind of do things for the longer term. So we don't really have a recipe for how long wines stay on skins, how long they stay in barrel, how long they're in bottle pre-release. Basically, we let the wine take its own time. So we blend from barrel when we feel that the wines are at their peak, and the same approach to releasing wines. So the 17, I feel, is now pretty much peaking. It'll continue to grow, but it is just drinking so beautifully right now. It's a really delicious wine. That vintage actually did really well recently. We were 1 point off a gold at the IWSC challenge in London. So we were the highest. That wine was the highest scoring New Zealand Pinot for that year. So yeah,
with this wine,
really,
I find lots of kind of rough plum, very chocolatey answers to it. So it's very rich, more that I think.
Yeah, that's right. So Te Kano, so that estate blend, which is the charcoal label, we're trying to express Bannockburn in its most pure form. So it's a blend of our 2 Bannockburn vineyards. We wanted to show both of them, express both of their characters. So Eliza has this plush generosity of fruit. It's got real plummy kind of mid-palate. It's got that black cherry, and it has these kind of hints of thyme from all the thyme growing in the hills around us. And so that's what's giving you that beautiful round fruit in the mid-palate. That's that Felton Road portion. And then on the finish, you get this really structured kind of line of tannin, which keeps the wine focused. And that's coming from the sandy soils of Jerome. So by blending those 2 components, we're creating a wine which is much more than the sum of its parts. You know, both of those wines individually are delicious, but when combined, they're really something special.
It's very quintessentially central Otago, is what I feel wine is. It sums it up really well. So I got 1 point away from gold at the awards. Dave, did I miss the stats on the oak of the Saturday? No, we didn't talk about Dave. Talk us through the oak application.
Didn't talk about the oak. So it all goes to oak. So 2018, we had 6 barrels. And so it was 33% new oak, which is 2 barrels of the 6. So it's always French oak, and it's always fermented in barrel. So we do a lot of lee stirring as well on those barrels. So we get that nuttiness, kind of hazelnut, and those popcorn characters starting to come out the longer we kind of interact the wine with its lees and with the oak. And it generally stays in barrel around 10 months.
Yeah. And do you hold it for wine back before you release it, or are they kind of bottled and shipped down? What's your...
Yeah, we always hold back a small amount of wines for library releases later. So our wine club members, for example, we always hold some library wines in reserve for them as a chance for them to kind of buy older vintage wines. The Pinots we tend to hold and bottle longer. The white wines, I feel, you know, they're drinking well pretty much as soon as they're bottled.
Yeah.
Whereas the Pinot and the Chardonnay, they both kind of go through these dips and troughs as they get over the bottle shock. So the Pinot, straight after bottling, is pretty hard to drink. And after around 6 months, it starts to just open up again and express itself.
Lovely. I've got some questions. Read a question to stump you with. Has been part of various wine festivals. Do you think that has contributed to your time and your expression at Te Kano?
How have I expressed myself to Te Kano, would you say?
Messages contribute to your wine style?
Well, I've done a lot of vintages. So I was what's called a flying winemaker. So I would go to the Northern Hemisphere and work up to 3 harvests there. So you can do cool climate, medium, and then or rather the other way around. You can do like an early harvest, kind of mid-season harvest, and then a cool climate harvest. So, for example, 1 year I worked in Penedès making cava in Spain, and then I went from there straight to Germany to do the Riesling harvest and ice wines. And that kind of flip-flopping around the globe and making wine in different places, it opened my eyes to the fact that you can approach winemaking from a number of ways. You know, you could give me a parcel of Chardonnay, or give the same parcel to 5 winemakers and they'll do 5 different things. But at the end of the day, you'll never outperform the fruit. It's the fruit that gives the wine that character, regardless of what we do to it.
Yeah.
And it's that expression of place and that expression of fruit purity, which I think is the mark of a really good winemaker, and something that I would aspire to. I don't want people to look at a wine that I've made and say, like, that looks like Dave's style. I want them to look at a wine that I've made and say, that looks like Northburn, or that looks like Bannockburn. And express the place. Yeah.
We had a question just before gone off my screen. I think it was to do with whole bunch and Pinot. Are there any whole bunch in the can of the Bannockburn?
Yes. Yep. There's whole bunches of grapes in there. We do different percentages every year. 17 was actually a very complicated wine to make because I was still learning about the vineyards, and they're very old vines, so those vines are 18, 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a really unique character. So we fermented every part of the vineyard as a separate parcel. We ended up with kind of 11 different batches to work with. And each one of those batches, I used a different amount of whole bunch. So up to 30% in some, no whole bunch in others, just kind of trying to see what worked with the fruit and what didn't. And we've settled into a kind of an understanding now, me and the vineyards, about what works and what doesn't. So this year we did some trials with 100% whole bunch, so full whole bunch. Wow, it really made some amazing wine, actually. We've got a block at Jerome, which is a tannic clone. It's 113, very high tannin, and on a very tannic site. And for years, I've been trying to find a way to manage those tannins. It makes this really aggressive, very, very structured wine, just that mouth coating, instant tannin. And so after dabbling with a lot of things like no extraction, no punch downs, only pump overs, picking early, picking late, finally I thought, well, let's just hit it with full whole bunch and see what it does. And it totally worked. It made this really juicy, very perfumed style of wine, very, very aromatic. And I think we're going to do that every year from now on. That is now how I make that vineyard. Yeah.
So the last question we have is, what is your favourite Te Kano wine at the moment? Which wine actually you drink?
Oh, well, it's kind of a silly question. Sorry, Mel. But I guess it depends what the context is. If I'm hanging out on the deck in the sun, then I'm hitting the Blanc de Noir or the Rosé. Actually, if I'm eating as well, like Blanc de Noir is a beautiful wine to pair with food. It cuts right through fattier foods, but it also sits really delicately alongside seafood and stuff like that. I love the Chardonnay. I love the Chardonnay because it takes you on a journey. You cool it right down, very, very, very cold. And when it first is in the glass, it's just crystalline, it's very citrusy, it's very, very fresh and mineral. And then as it warms, it just gets more expressive, more full-bodied. It starts to really open up and you get these rich kind of barrel notes coming out. So yeah, probably the Chardonnay would be the wine which I think the most of.
Great. We've got one more quick question here before we sign off. You mentioned a whole bunch. What does that add wine?
Yeah, okay. So whole bunch with Pinot Noir is talking about adding all of the bunches into the fermenter with their stems. So what that typically adds is structure. So the stems have tannin as well. And so the stem tannin has a more peppery kind of not quite green, but that more interesting kind of tobacco-y spectrum. And also the whole berries are in the fermenter with juice inside them fermenting. So it's pretty crazy, actually. Like, you can pick one off and bite it, and it explodes. It's full of fermenting grape juice. And so that fermentation happening inside the berry makes these really sweet, really fruity, they're called carbonic characters. So it's like bubblegummy, very sweet fruit, very, very bright, expressive. So you get these kind of two things happening. You get more structure from the tannin, but you also get that generosity, that lovely bright fruit flavor.
And we love those bright fruit flavors.
Oh.
Well, hi, Jamie. Good. He's back to the party. We're going to finish up in a minute, but I just wanted to ask about this Victorian cellar door they've built down there, because I don't think we've properly described that. Told everyone what it's about. Insanely beautiful. So tell us a little bit about your cellar door before we sign off this evening. And it is new at the moment, so o'clock with, I think it's Wilco from Dry River tonight. So for those who are tonight, you must join the clock. But tell us a bit about the
Well, the cellar door, again, labour of love. We decided that we wanted to have a place on our Felton Road vineyard to bring people into our home. And so we thought a lot about what that experience was going to be like for people. And we decided we wanted to build a relatively small structure. So it's a very small room, more like a wine lounge than a kind of a shop. Make it very comfortable and kind of have a way to invite people in and bring them into our world. So we're very fortunate to have an architect who was sensitive to that vision, and they designed this kind of crazy cantilevered building which hangs out over a terrace. So you walk out onto the terrace and you're standing basically in thin air, suspended above our Bannockburn vineyard, and then as you walk back through the building, you kind of emerge back into the vineyard and pop out into our home, you know. So we set him a brief. We wanted it to be sustainable in nature. So they used actually recycled shipping containers to build the building, and then they clad it in all raw materials, so untreated wood, untreated steel. It's just a really striking and unique building. And yeah, fortunately, so we actually won Best New Hospitality Building in the Southern Architecture Awards this year. So best new piece of architecture in the South Island, basically.
Brilliant.
And it's amazing. It's an experience, and one that hopefully some of you can come and experience for yourselves one day.
Well, when we can eventually get back down to we're stuck up here for now. But on that note, I'd like to thank you so much from everyone up here. I know everyone who joined us this evening will be relishing the wines at home. We've got a couple of days to drink them. Thank you. Introduction.
Thank you, Mel.
And share it on your IGTV after this live and post. That would be helpful. And in Chicago, we'll have virtually again another here in the UK.
Sounds great. Thank you, Mel. Thank you, Internet.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and make sure everybody joins Jamie at 8 o'clock to see Wilco.
Cool. Thanks, team.
Bye.
Bye now.